Hi, I'm Timothy Wynn, and you are listening to the Audio Description Narrators of America Know Your Narrator series, Beyond Your Narrator episode.
Today we're very happy to have Bonnie Barlow with us. Thanks for joining us, Bonnie.
Thank you for having me.
With your credit list of so many different experiences in audio description, over 240, I have to start by asking you what you love about audio description.
I love that it's always something new and different and creative. And also love that it's helping other people enjoy the arts and entertainment, which is a big thing in my life. So I just like having a captive audience.
Very good. And with that variety and creativity, I'm curious if your creativity as a writer of audio description, how that comes out. Like, where is your, as a writer, what do you bring to audio description that makes it work for audiences?
Well, basically, there's always the principles and rules to follow. And those, of course, the main one being be objective and be succinct and say what you're seeing and not what you're feeling and thinking you're seeing. The process starts the same for each kind of description when it comes to that. And then the creativity comes in where I consider the audience first instead of last. So if it's going to be delivered by a streaming service, or if it's going to be delivered by a video in YouTube and that sort of thing, I kind of gauge and change my narration slightly for that. But the creativity in each script comes in not finding fancy ways to say things, because then as a describer, I'm drawing attention to myself and away from the program. So I want to find ways to convey what they've already created. And sometimes that includes putting things together in a category or a grouping first, and then if you have time, doing the details later. So for instance, we might say, it's a group of people of all cultures or a diverse group of people in a room and blah, blah, blah. So that's like the way I started Hamilton. And so then, saying all of these principal characters are played by people of color, I've already got that in the person's mind. And so that's my kind of way. And then if I'm able to give more details about each person as they come up, that can happen. And that's a show in which the diversity is really a huge part. Other shows, you have to play down the diversity in terms of if you try to describe everyone, you end up not being able to do anyone service, So I don't know if I answered your question or not, but the creativity just comes in thinking about where it's going, how it's going to get there, and how it's going to convey what it needs to.
And I love how that creativity really ties into the variety that you talk about, specifically when it comes to the attention of the audience and making sure the audience is what your focus is and not yourself. That is relative. That as you had said, whether it's Hamilton or something else, that each show, each scene almost has its own intention that the filmmaker is trying to share, and you're helping bring that to life in parody with sighted audiences.
Right, and trying to do so in an unobtrusive way, because being succinct and not talking sometimes is more important than describing something if it's not really of the utmost importance in that scene. You got to kind of let the thing breathe, like a fine wine.
What a great comparison. If you think about your experience from when you started, in your resume you listed 28 years ago, and we're recording this at the end of 2020, to now, are there things that have stayed the same or some things that have changed for you?
Oh, everything's changed. Technology, for one, which is wonderful, because, of course, at the beginning, it was mostly in theaters and for plays, and that was great, but it was a very locally concentrated group. But it was a great way to kind of work out all the kinks, to find, when you've kind of done all the groundwork, or so you think, and all the prep, and then something goes wrong with the sound on the day of description, and the rest of it was for naught, or the communication breaks down, or the ushers don't know how to help someone, change out their malfunctioning device, and that sort of thing. And if the system doesn't work, it's like a sighted audience going to the play and sitting there with the curtain closed and listening to the play instead of getting the whole experience. And so it's not fair to produce a half of an experience for, everyone deserves the full thing. So communication's a huge challenge in all of that. And I always lose track of where I started from. What was the question?
We're doing great. And this is a great segue. We were asking about how things have changed from when you started to where we are now. And I'm curious how you think the audience has evolved from then to now.
Haha. Well, I've gotten smarter. Let me go back, though, to the changes real quick, which is in the theaters. So it was always kind of a really organic experience. You got your equipment, your little FM transmitter. You go sit in a booth and try not to let the other people in the booth who are talking bleed over into your description. And you try to see the stage. And so you have to adapt to each theater and to each crew and liaison and all of those things that come into play there. So it's like this huge, choreographed kind of dance every single time. And so how it has changed now is with more of the digital everything. I early on wanted to start doing remote description because even though I'd been doing it for so long, there's still always a challenge doing it in a theater physically. And it was always based on whether my equipment crossed over their equipment and signals got missed, or, something I couldn't see the play, or they'd have to hear the play through my headphones along with me and my description, which causes a delay. And so it really, as I've been experimenting with probably like the last 2 years, doing Zoom meetings and remote description, either from within a booth in the theater or from home, and having someone at the venue FaceTime the content to me. So like I did a film premiere and they FaceTimed the content of the movie, and I had a Zoom meeting with the visually impaired person who was attending, and they had in their headphone and they just clicked on my link and I was able to describe at the same time what was going on. Or we did that here in Denver when the theater group Family, which is made up of people with disabilities, as the actors, did a 7-play kind of marathon, or, like a progressive dinner, but of plays. So everybody went in, sat in one little room in a gallery, and then went to another, and having someone going with the blind patron to each of those performances and showing it to me, and me continuing to describe on that device worked. Whereas if I had tried to set up physically in that building, it wouldn't have worked. I mean, there just wasn't going to be that many soundproof areas to work from. So, and then, sometimes I will describe things on Zoom for a friend. So it's just always, I kind of, having dipped my toe into all of those different pools, I can usually figure out which one someone needs when they need my services to get there the quickest, the least expensively, and the most effectively.
We've covered a lot here with the focus on the audience and also the technology changes. Where would you love to see audio description go?
More. We want more. I'd love to see it go to, I don't like rigid, construction of systems and, requirements. But I would like to see more centralization of information and access, so that people who are visually impaired, who are out in the community, I mean, now they have all of these choices, but each one has a different way, again, to get to it. And navigating on their phone or on their, Netflix, on their TV or their computer, all are different. And they have to use voiceover, and so kind of deal with the content talking at them at the same time, voiceover on their phone or computers, giving them info. So a describer wants to be aware of that sort of thing. But they just, you go to YouTube and they don't just have a secondary program channel for the description. You have to actually find the described version of a video by typing in that video audio description. And so that needs to be consistently presented by the producers of the content, and it usually isn't. They'll say descriptive video or something else. But it has finally kind of been determined and agreed upon industry-wide that audio description should be the go-to keywords for most description, whether it's, video, streaming, that you should always include that so that people can find it under that 2-word indicator. And then, so some way of, they can go find a list of what's described, but it might be described when they access it on Netflix. But if they go to it on Hulu or Amazon, it might not be the described version, or it might be described by someone else. So there's not a real good communication between all of the people who are providing description for their media. And it's just sad. I think that it's not addressed in a centralized way with as much import as something like closed captioning and sign language. We've done those for a lot of years, and they kind of got it down on what they need to do and how they need to do it. And now they're, tweaking and that sort of thing, but they've got their basics going and people know where to get to it. But for audio description, it's kind of like, yeah, we're just adding this in and it's good enough if we do it over here, but not over there. They kind of miss the point of it. Unless someone can really experience audio description, it's hard to even understand what it is and how it's done. So I would like to see more centralization of, and Audio Description Project does pretty well with their website on the whole list of everything that's out there, on each service where they're available and how to get there from here. So that's great. And I recommend that to everyone, to find media there. Sometimes I send out a list to my people on my visually impaired email list, telling them which things I've written and where they can find them and how they can get there, and whether to choose closed caption first and then English descriptive, or, how to find it. And then there are separate audio websites where they can download the audio, like ActiView, and listen and watch the movie on one device and listen to the description on another, and it syncs up with the audio. That's how it works in the theaters. So I'll stop talking now.
Please don't. And it's wonderful to hear about the hurdles that the company that's now taken over ActiView, which is Spectrum Access, that they've found some hurdles that historically, I guess legally, have prevented that kind of access. And like you said, that technology is changing, that, sometimes blind or sighted people have to go to 6 different websites or apps or log in here or do that. And there's a lot of hurdles that are unintentionally placed in that accessibility of access. It gets a little heady there. But to your point, I love that. And I'm curious what you think about this. When it comes to the title audio description, that accomplishes a lot by simplifying what's already a really complex, hard to understand thing, as you said, until people experience it. That, whether it's descriptive video or audio description or video description, that each of these terms implies something that it may or may not be. How do you feel about that title audio description? Does that work for you?
Well, you know what? Let me just throw another kind of thing in your gears or your bicycle wheel spokes. Audio description is, we're describing auditorily, but we're not describing audio. We're describing video or visual or sound and vision, but the sound has to match with the vision. Otherwise, we don't have to describe it. So it's really visual interpretation. Or is it visual translation? Or, that video that you did with all the ways that you can kind of try to get to description, that was perfect. I'm going to be showing that to people, if I may, because that's the way it is. It's like, I don't know, none of it describes it well enough. And that's supposed to be my job, is to describe things well. It's not indescribable. I always say it is describable. I just have to figure out how to do it. Sometimes I have to pare it down to, okay, if I was sitting next to my blind friend, Gail, and we were watching this thing and I was trying to explain it, what would I say starting at the beginning? Okay, there's a guy sitting on the ground. What is he doing? So you kind of have to build it from the bottom up sometimes instead of detailing from the top down in order to get to, what's really the basic foundation of this scene and getting it to mesh with everything else. I don't know. I don't think audio description should be the final word either. But if it's something that's fairly consistent right now, that's probably good, but it's still not quite it.
And you made a great comparison earlier with closed captioning, that once they found their foundation, then they started tweaking, and it sounds like that would align with what you're speaking about specifically with audio description.
Right.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
Oh man. So much, so little time, so many things to describe. I can't help it. I'll take a blind friend somewhere in the car and I'm telling them, well, the stores that are on each side of the street. It's like, and over on our left, we have a used car lot called blah, blah. And then over on the right, we have, Burger King right next to Chick-fil-A. And like, where are you going to go? And, oh, there's a frame shop for photographs. And, it's just, you really don't have to describe everything to me. Oh, but I want to. I can't help it. So yeah, just people keep trying. I'm also trying to find ways to make it easier for people who are interested in becoming description writers or quality assurance folk or narrators to kind of mesh their skills with what audio description requires and kind of really tweak those details so that you can really provide great description and more people can do it. Visually impaired people need to be involved in the process all along the way, including communicating with those producers and, media folk and Hollywood types and Orson Welles and all them guys, how it works and how they receive it and what difficulties they run into. And it's hard to kind of make that connection between those people. And sometimes you'll have folks who are producing, you said accessibility to the accessibility, and that's what we need. We need people to be able to access what's happening. So these producers need to have feedback from visually impaired listeners, and it's often really hard. Facebook and other social media makes it a little better now. But I think in some ways the producers of the media remove themselves from the general public so they don't have to listen. Like HBO Max finally is starting to do audio description, but it took many complaints and forever. And so when they offer it hesitatingly, if they're not like fully on board, it's a lot harder process than when you run into those wonderful unicorns who are media producers and playwrights and all of that, who are so into providing this access to people with disabilities and to visually impaired folks that they're just all in there with you, and they'll help you be creative, and they'll help you market it, and they'll help you, and then you can help them by finding the audience for them at first to get it built up. Because if you build it but you don't let people know, nobody comes. It ain't like Field of Dreams. So that's one of my things too, is try to put your efforts into where people are actually going to listen to you and make some progress with you.
Bonnie, you mentioned an email list, but if you're comfortable, could you share with how people can follow you on social media?
Be creative, and there's a hyphen between the B for Bonnie, hyphen creative, audio and video describing. And there I was kind of trying to include several concepts there, because I didn't want to just say audio description. I didn't just want to say video description. And so then under that, I include consulting and helping theaters start description and helping people figure out how to do remote description. Either I can help them or they can start doing these things with their own people. So be creative.com, basically, with a hyphen after the B. Also, Audio Description Colorado. And that's another one. Do my email address, which is bonniejbarlow@gmail.com. So it's BONNIEJBARLOW@gmail.com. And Facebook, Audio Description Colorado is also Facebook. Sometimes I'll, put things on there like, please say hi if you come here, so I can know that you were here and how I can help you.
Really great talking to you.
Hey, you too.